Funding for Texas Monthly Talks is provided in part by Public Strategies Incorporated, managing campaigns for corporations, around the clock, around the world. And by J.P. Morgan Chase, a Texas financial institution serving large and small businesses, governments, schools, churches, and individual Texans just like you for more than 135 years. And also by Texas Mutual.
Sometimes the littlest ideas become the biggest innovations. That's true in your business and in ours. Texas Mutual Insurance Company, innovating workers' comp insurance for Texas.
And also by the Matson McHale Foundation, in support of public television. And by MFI Foundation, improving the quality of life within our community. And also by the Alice Clayburgh Reynolds Foundation. And viewers like you. Thank you.
I'm Evan Smith, the editor of Texas Monthly. She needs no introduction. That's what more than a year on the campaign trail will do for you. A year of front-page headlines, TV commercials, whistle stops, talk show drop-bys, attacks by various vast conspiracies in print and online, and debate after debate after debate. Not to mention 7 years in the U.S. Senate, 8 years as First Lady, and a total of 35 years, by her count, pushing progressive policies in private and public life. It's hard to imagine a more recognizable name or face at this point than Hillary Clinton's, which has a fair amount to do with her status as frontrunner at the start of the Democratic presidential campaign. She was, for good or ill, the party's biggest brand, with a resume and a roster of accomplishments to back up the widely held assumption that the nomination was hers to lose. Just the same, celebrity has its downsides. And so Senator Clinton found out these last several months, not that she didn't already know, that she who rises fast falls fast. The horse race narrative of the campaign has kept careful, sometimes gleeful watch over her ups and downs. Her drubbing in Iowa, her comeback in New Hampshire, her further drubbing in South Carolina, her wins in the crucial states of California, New York, Massachusetts, and New Jersey on Super Tuesday, and then, bracingly, her 10 straight losses, some by astounding margins, in the caucuses and primaries that followed. Now, as we all know, comes Texas on March 4th, along with Ohio, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Win here and she goes on. Lose here and, well, that's not as clear. Her famous husband and one of her more famous supporters, James Carville, have each characterized Texas as a do-or-die firewall. The candidate herself is not so sure, as you're about to hear. Senator Clinton was kind enough to give us 30 minutes early in the morning of February 22nd, not even 12 hours after she debated Barack Obama to a draw in Austin, to talk about issues of concern to voters in our fair state, as well as the hardball tactics she says she'll employ if this thing goes all the way to the convention. Anyone who says it's over, or that she's planning to make a graceful exit from the race sometime soon, had better think again. A conversation with Hillary Clinton on this edition of Texas Monthly Talks. Essentially do a version of that. This will be a fun night. Okay. It worked out. I got the call. It's on the one. It's on PBS. Lewis. And then and then, I stopped my show to get back to it, but it's okay. Please take your seat. All right, good. Senator Clinton, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for being here.
I'm happy to be here.
Let me begin by asking you something about last night's debate and the very eloquent and emotional comments you made at the end when you said, no matter what happens, we're going to be fine, and we hope the American people will be fine. After the debate, the pundits seemed to gravitate to that comment. And many of them characterized it as a valedictory. They thought that you were trying to telegraph something about how you saw the rest of this campaign going, that maybe you saw an end coming. And I wonder if you would talk a bit about that.
Well, what I was saying had nothing to do with the campaign so much as, the future of our country. Obviously, for me, as I've said many times before, politics isn't a game. It's not about who's up or who's down or the horse race. It's, what's going to happen to the people who are really looking to those of us who are leaders as to whether or not they're going to have better lives, whether they're going to feel like they have a president again who's listening to them and seeing them. And what I was, really referring to is that, people with the education and the, affluence that Barack and I have are doing this because we love our country. But it's fair to say that, elections end and we're still going to have, our law degrees from Harvard and Yale, and we're still going to have, families and friends that support us. And that's not the case for everybody in this country right now, that feels somehow as though the deck is stacked against them, that they're not being given the chances that you're supposed to have as part of the American birthright. And that bothers me.
Right. So when people took this as somehow about you, in fact, it was about the American people.
Well, yes, it wasn't about me at all. Running for president is such an intimate experience on one level. I mean, the public sees, all of the trappings and interviews and appearances and big crowds. But what stays with me are those sort of personal moments where I'm talking to somebody about her losing her home and she bursts into tears, or a little kid is kind of thrust forward to me, and a mother says, he has a congenital heart defect and I don't know where I'm going to get the health care he needs. I feel a sense of responsibility that I'm out here, I'm asking people for their votes, what am I going to do for them? That's really what it comes down to.
You've traveled around Texas a lot over these last couple of days and weeks as you prepare for the primary, and you've met a lot of new people, but also reconnected with people because you have roots that go back 35 or more years in the state. Right. Would you talk about your original time in the state? It was during the McGovern campaign, was it not?
It was. Evan, it was my very first job in politics. I was hired by the Democratic National Committee to come down to Texas starting in August to register voters. Right. And I just had the greatest time. I made friends that have been my friends for a lifetime. Right. A lot of the people supporting me, Raul Izagirre, who started La Raza, is somebody who's been a friend of mine going back all of those years. Obviously, Roy Spence and Gary Morrow became close friends. And I just felt such a sense of, coming back to a place that meant a lot to me when I was young, being here these last weeks.
When you think about the conversations you've had with people around the state, tell me the 2 or 3 big issues on the minds of Texans specifically. They may be the same issues on the minds of Americans, but tell us what you're hearing from Texans as the things that matter.
Well, I was in San Antonio going door to door with some friends from back in 1972. And I met a soldier who was about to go on his 5th deployment, but he had a medical challenge that was being worked out. And he said, look, I'm a soldier, I'm professional, but going over 5 times, I mean, this has got to end. I hear a lot about Iraq. Bring my husband home, bring my son home. I hear about health care. I hear about that everywhere, but Texas has one of the highest rates of uninsured people in the country. 25% of the population doesn't have health insurance. So it's understandable that I would run into people who don't have health care. And it's one of the big differences between Senator Obama and me, because I think everybody should be covered and there should be shared responsibility. I hear about the home foreclosures, again, something that I have been really adamant about, coming up with a strategy that I think would work. And of course, immigration. In every place I go, as one would expect, because of the makeup of the population and the border. All along the border, lots of questions about the wall. What are we doing? What sense does this make? As I said in the debate, I was at UT Brownsville. The way the Bush administration has it planned, the wall would go right through the campus.
Divide the campus.
I mean, that's ridiculous. And I've said over and over again, we have to protect our borders. We've got to have smarter border security. It's imperative we know who's coming into our country, but there is a smart way of doing it and a dumb way of doing it. And once again, I just feel like the Bush administration is, taking a sledgehammer to kill a gnat. We've got a problem. Let's be smart about how we deal with it.
Let's take a couple of those issues one at a time. The Iraq War is obviously very important to Texas. We have the 2nd highest number of casualties of any state in the country and have sent over maybe the 2nd or 3rd highest number of soldiers. So understandably, people are going to have questions about the war and very possibly about your vote to authorize the war. Senator Obama has made a lot of this, said again last night, a war we shouldn't have authorized and shouldn't have waged. You seem not to respond to that last night. You've responded in the past. I wonder if you would talk a little bit, now that you've been through this campaign, heard it so many times, is it a fair criticism for him to say you shouldn't have authorized the war, Senator Clinton?
Well, you know, obviously, if I had known then what I know now, I would not have given President Bush the authority. But I think we're doing a lot of second-guessing and revisionist history here. And Senator Obama did not have to take a vote. And, you know, he's never held accountable for the fact that he said he wasn't sure how he would have voted. And in 2004, he basically agreed with President Bush's conduct of the war. And when he came to the Senate, he and I have voted exactly the same way. People can draw their own conclusions. But ultimately, we're going to have to figure out what to do now going forward. And I think, you know, my service on the Senate Armed Services Committee, the very broad support I have from the retired military officers who I've gotten to know, who have watched me in action, you know, suggests strongly that I am in a much better position to actually have the credibility to bring our troops home. This is not going to be easy. You know the general election against John McCain is going to be waged on what it is that we will cause by bringing our troops home. And I think I can much better defend that position and go toe-to-toe with John McCain than Senator Obama.
So when the comment is made that it's harder for someone who voted to authorize the war to go against John McCain in the fall and argue about Iraq than it would be someone who opposed the war, you don't believe
I don't buy that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the American people are, you know, looking to see who can be the commander-in-chief. They're going to want to know that whoever is bringing those troops home really understands the sacrifice that our men and women have made. They don't want it to be in vain, and neither do I. We have lost too many lives. There are too many people injured. As I talked last night, you go out to Brooke, you go to this new Intrepid Center, you know, you shake hands with, you know, men and women who've lost legs and arms and eyes, and they look at you and they say, don't let it be in vain. I've heard that, I can't tell you how many times. They want someone with the strength and experience and, frankly, the credibility to do whatever we have to do in a way that honors their service. And I think I can do that. We will take hits for leaving. John McCain is right about that. He is wrong that that is a reason to stay. But this is going to have to be navigated very carefully. And I believe that, you know, my work over now 15 years better positions me to understand how to unwind our commitment in Iraq.
Okay, how to unwind our commitment in Iraq. Tell us what you would do on day one.
Well, on day one, I would have to ask our Secretary of Defense and our Joint Chiefs of Staff and the security advisors to immediately put together a plan, because I have no confidence that planning under President Bush has gone on the way it should. In fact, I am the only one who has been pushing to make sure that the Pentagon is focused on redeployment. You know, going back to last spring now, nearly a year, when I started asking a lot of tough questions. You know, have you or have you not done the planning with the operational details necessary? You know, withdrawing troops is dangerous. This is the kind of consideration that a president has to make with the military advisors and the civilian leadership in the Pentagon.
Right. Okay. Let's move over to immigration, which you mentioned. It was pointed out last night. Both you and Senator Obama voted for the piece of legislation that authorized the border fence. Is that a vote you'd like to have back now?
Well, the idea of a physical barrier in some places as part of an overall strategy to secure our borders is something that I think has to be considered, and that's why I voted for it. But once again, we find the Bush administration with its unfortunate tendency to, you know, mess up a two-car parade, making this a complicated and divisive issue. What I've said is we should review what has gone on. Bring in the people along the border who actually have a better understanding than the Department of Homeland Security, one of the most dysfunctional government agencies ever created, and figure out how we're going to, you know, use the authority in a smart way. And I would do that, and I don't think that this administration has.
But if you go to El Paso and talk to those people, the people you referred to last night and just now, whose lives would be impacted directly by this wall, if you talk to Sylvester Reyes, who is a supporter of yours, congressman from El Paso, former Border Patrol sector chief, they'll tell you no wall. They'll tell you we don't want a wall. It would impact the economy, our relationship with Juarez. It would impact the free flow of families back and forth across the border. So why not listen to Sylvester Reyes and come out against the wall completely?
Well, in Texas and along the border, that might be the conclusion after careful review. That might not be in other parts of the border. So I don't think...
Not one policy then across...
That's the whole point. Yeah. I mean, we provided a lot of different assets to be used. You know, it shouldn't be a blunt instrument. And, you know, Congressman Reyes is right about that. You know, we've got to listen to what people who actually have firsthand experience have to say. I have talked to the Department of Homeland Security and the Secretary about the northern border because New York shares that.
With Canada.
With Canada. Yes. So I can speak from experience. It is impossible to get them to listen. So, you know, again, let's be intelligent enough to actually listen and learn from what people who have firsthand knowledge can tell us. And, you know, the Bush administration is not noted for listening, and this is yet one more example.
Okay. Let me ask you about lobbying, something that you didn't mention but has been mentioned a lot on the campaign trail. Senator Obama has said, referring to you, Senator Clinton, that we have a candidate who has taken more money from lobbyists and special interests than any candidate in either party, and he says, but I, Senator Obama, have not taken a dime from lobbyists. Is that characterization of you fair, and is it a characterization of him that's fair?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, it makes for a good soundbite, but it's not rooted in the evidence. If he's talking about the narrow issue of registered lobbyists, he says he doesn't. Well, he did until he started running for president. Maybe that's a distinction. It may not have much of a difference, however. You know, it's a great soundbite. It is rooted in an artificial distinction. We know we've got to change the way we finance presidential and federal elections. I have been a strong supporter of that. I am on the strongest piece of legislation that would bring about those changes. But, you know, if you took money from lobbyists until you started running for president, if you continued to take money from lobbyists for your PAC, your leadership PAC, so that you could donate money to candidates and super delegates, if you had lobbyists running your campaigns, if you had lobbyists that put together the money to bundle and held the events but didn't give themselves, come on, what's the difference?
So what can you say to people who would assure you that, what would you say to people who